In international schools, career progression isn't just about climbing a ladder. It's about recognizing potential, nurturing purpose, and creating environments where educators can thrive at every stage of their journey. Yet across the international school sector, the pathways for growth can sometimes feel unclear or inconsistent. In today's roundtable discussion, in partnership with NextGen Talent, we'll be exploring what meaningful progression really looks like in practice, from moving into leadership roles, broadening professional impact within the classroom, to building a culture where talent is recognized and supported. We'll also look at the role that school leadership can play in shaping fair, transparent, and motivating pathways for all staff. So I'm delighted to be joined by our panel of educators today, comprised of varying backgrounds and regions around the world. So it'd be great to start with some introductions. So if everyone could briefly share their journey in education to date, the role and context you're currently working in, that would be fantastic. Philip, would you mind just kicking us off there?
Yeah, not a problem. So my name is Philip Stainton. I'm the founding vice principal and head of secondary at Arcadia Global School. I bounced around a few different countries, started in the UK, then made a move out to China with Wellington College, then to Egypt, and now finally here in the UAE with the fabulous Arcadia Group. And I'm really proud to lead the school as a brand new school.
Excellent. Thanks, Philip. Jamie?
Hi there, yeah, my name's Jamie Smart, originally from the southwest of England. I've been in education for 16 years, bouncing between teacher and middle leadership roles. Tomorrow I start my next middle leadership role as the head of maths at GEMS Founders School in Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. I've been here with my family now for 5 years and really looking forward to the new role.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. Arif?
Hi, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I'm currently starting at Qinglan School. I'm in Dongguan, China, as the new middle school humanities teacher. Before this, I was at Repton, Dubai, where I taught inclusion, working with ELL students in the junior and senior phase. And before that, I was in the Delta School District, which is just outside Vancouver. I taught ELL, socials, and PE.
Lisa?
Hi, my name's Lisa Thorpe. I am the new head of primary at Ascot International School in Bangkok. I have been living and working overseas since 2008. A majority of my time was in Dubai, UAE, where I served in many different leadership roles across different school groups. And yeah, now I'm in Bangkok.
Thanks, Lisa. Lorna?
Hi, I'm Lorna. I'm from England. I was a EAL teacher for many years before completing my PGCE. I then moved to an international school, teaching primary in Serbia. And I'm now in my third year in South Korea at a small primary school here, just studying a literacy lead and curriculum lead with primary.
Whitney?
Hi, I'm Whitney Edmondson. I've been working most recently in Abu Dhabi for the last 7 years. Part of that journey was joining an amazing IB school and actually being part of the team that opened a brand new school here as well. So in the 7 years, I've worked across 2 campuses. And this year, I'm actually starting a brand new role in Saudi Arabia in Jeddah as the founding head of maths for whole school at Sherborne International School.
And Yael and Harish, if you could also briefly explain a bit about NextGen Talent as well, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I'll just introduce myself first. I've started off in the UK teaching in East London and the south of England, and then I've worked in Singapore, Doha, Kuwait, most recently China, and I've held multiple roles. So homeroom teacher is my passion, primary is my background, particularly within the PYP, the IB, but I've been a learning lead, a deputy principal, a principal, and most recently a head of school with about 1,200 students that has all 3 IB programs. So my background is really quite varied, and I hope that I can contribute to this dialogue today.
Hi, I'm Yael Kess. I've got a lot of years experience in education, in the operations side of education. I'm a organizational behavior and design specialist, and I'm the co-founder of NextGen Talent Group. And we are the provider of the Ethical Employer Scheme to schools, where we provide and support schools going through the process of becoming ethical employers, which means a lot of things. And part of these things are how do you support your your professionals, all professionals in schools, in their career development throughout your policies, your operation, and everything beyond. So,
thanks, Yael. Okay, brilliant. So kicking straight off with our first question. So when you think about your individual futures in education, just sort of touching on what kind of growth or progression feels most meaningful to you currently. So yeah, Arif, would you mind kicking us off with that question? Your thoughts on that one?
I think most of us would start with about how we impact, whether it be the students, the surrounding community, how we can make a difference to the parents we work with. But when we talk about, I think it's about the connections we make. But then it's the responsibilities have to be real. I feel like a lot of times we get given additional tasks and you feel like it's busy work, but it's not making you feel like you're progressing or making more of a difference to the community. You have to feel, I think, as an educator, that you're providing benefit, you're leaving a lasting impact. You like to create or spark that flame or light that fire in someone so that they go out and explore it themselves. We're not just filling a pail. It's about creating that curiosity for someone else to follow through on. And then I think that's it. That's the impact that we're looking to create.
Yeah, I suppose for me in my career, that sort of question of meaningful progression has sort of changed for me. I think initially in my initial stages of my career, it was very much, I very much had the mindset that if I just did the time and I did enough hard work and gained enough experience, that I would progress along with it, and the titles and the sort of leadership would come my way. And I suppose in time that I've realized that actually leadership is a little bit different to that. So good teaching and learning is one aspect of being a good leader, depending on the roles that you're in. But certainly over the last few years, I've sort of learned and had to, I suppose, as an educator, accept the fact that leadership is a bit different to that. So I've done a lot of growing as a leader, I feel, in the last few years. So I suppose for me, meaningful growth is something that, gives me some, it makes me want to go to that next stage in some way. If you're a good teacher, that could just be developing yourself and, feeling like you're learning something more about just teaching in general. But for me now, as a developing leader, I really want to find out what these nuances are about being a good leader. And that's a different thing than the start of my career,
Yeah, for sure. It's an evolving thing, right? And Philip, from the perspective of a founding principal, what are your thoughts on that one in terms of what's most meaningful for you right now in your career?
I think overall it's about leaving legacy-based decisions in schools. It was touched on about working with the community and leaving a lasting impression on that community. But there is generally a fundamental difference between international education and your home-based education, wherever that is, wherever you've grown up and been educated there. Because if you are a teacher within the country that you consider perhaps your maternal home, there's a fair chance that you're likely to stay in that school longer. You build roots in that country, and therefore the transient nature isn't so much. In international education, everyone's heard the bios of the people and introductions to the people in the school, and we've moved around in different countries for different reasons, and hopefully all those are positive moves and positive decisions to move on and experience new challenges and new countries and new cultures. But with that in mind means that our lifespan in education within these schools is probably shorter on average than those that are staying within their own country. So what's meaningful for me is to make sure that the decisions I'm making are not decisions for today or tomorrow, but for 3-4 years' time. That when the day comes that I hand over the school I'm running to the next leader, I leave it in a better place than where I joined it, and the decisions I've made will future impact in a positive way for their decisions moving forward. So for me, it goes about legacy-based decisions.
Yael, Harish, in terms of educators that you've worked with and what you've observed, what are you seeing as sort of key drivers for growth and progression? What's meaningful to educators and senior leaders?
So What I would add to that is I agree with what everyone has said. Just the impact. I think as you progress into leadership, you're really doing it to make a wider impact. You know, as a homeroom teacher, you impact the 22 students that you have in your care. And as you move into a middle leader role or a principal position, you're having a much wider impact. And as Philip was saying, you are putting in structures and systems that are going to outlast your tenure at the school, because none of us stay in those positions forever. And we need to make sure that what we do contribute has really been thought through. It's of value to the students in your care, but also is progressive with the needs of the community. So with that comes, you know, equity and intercultural understanding, best fit curriculums. Each country has their own nuances, their own state regulations, and doing what's going to work within that community might be very different in other contexts. So being clued in, I think, is very, very important.
My thoughts are a bit different. I really appreciate what everyone said, and I agree with that. But I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I'm looking at each individual person here's career progression in the sense of how do they feel as employees? What, you know, we know the impact, we understand the impact, we wish the impact would be as everybody said, but research shows that meaningful growth combines purpose, progress, and hope for employees in organization, and to keep them motivated. All this supported by systems that value both professional achievement and personal well-being. So I'm looking at it more systematically than you know, what's the impact on the specific place that you're working. It's rather what it brings you as an individual and how that helps you engage better or less within the system. And that's why I'm such an advocate for clear, transparent career pathway, not just for leadership roles, but for everyone, for every educator, but every employee in schools. And when schools recognize the full range of contribution, provide opportunities to build skills and ensure fair, inclusive access to progression, they don't just fill roles, they raise opportunities for developing loyalty, engagement, and strengthened culture. And what isn't sustainable is asking, for example, and I'm telling you an example that I've heard before from educators that I've interviewed and worked with schools, that people told me that is something like asking educators to take extra responsibilities for minimal compensation, like head of department, which is volunteering, but then it's a lot of work and you're paying very little. So with no clear link to actually career advancement or recognition.
Thanks, Yael. Lisa, from your perspective as a senior leader now in a school in Thailand?
Thanks. So I know this has been said a lot already, but I really do think it is about impact and what we can leave behind. But as I'm moving into a new role, it's not about the title that I have or the title I could have in the future. It's about how am I making decisions that are teacher first and really helping to support the community, really mentoring and coaching like emerging leaders, and then also looking for avenues for mentoring and coaching for myself. You know, I'm in a new environment. Yes, I might know leadership, but I know leadership in a different context. So I think part of, you know, the career progression for myself is looking for avenues in this region to broaden my network, to have a mentor who can, you know, I can speak to in this context, because, you know, whilst I'll be doing that for the team I'm working with, it's also really important that I have that for myself, even if I'm happy with being a head of primary for the rest of my career. It's also looking at different ways in how I can be a head of primary and how I can support other people that I'm working with. So just being cognizant of both sides of that, like what decisions am I making to help those around me, and what am I doing to help myself as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. Lorna, as a teacher now in Korea, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so when I started teaching, I really wasn't interested in a leadership role at all. It just looked like something that I wasn't interested in. I really enjoyed classroom teaching, and that was all I wanted to focus on. And then moving to different schools, you were very limited with what you could do just as a teacher. So I think being able to step into leadership roles, having that opportunity where you can actually make more of a difference, where you can do this training and see these things and attend these different contracts, and actually bring that to your school and actually make implementations, is a really powerful thing. And it's something you have to be very responsible with as well, of course. But it makes such a difference for me to be able to have more of an impact on what my school is actually doing, and to be able to say to the other people in the team, like, I've gone to a conference on this and we've studied this and these results are really well. Should we trial it and see how it goes? So,
yeah. Thanks, Lorna. And Whitney, your thoughts on what's meaningful to you at the moment?
I think everyone probably said the things I would have said. I agree with legacy and lasting impact, but I think what Lisa said about coaching is incredibly important. And I think I go through phases where I'm like, do I really want leadership? Do I want to get back in the classroom? Because I think we all started this journey absolutely loving teaching. And what I've learned is the more members of my team that I can coach and develop, the more impact I have on the children in the classrooms. And that's really what's at my heart. So I go through phases where I'm thinking, you know, I'll just stay in this role and it's okay, but my personality also wants me to just help everybody to be even better. And that links to what Lisa said of, I also want to look now for more support for me to become a better leader. But I really do think leaders are coaches. I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to go down the managerial route. I want to be a better coach, and I want to continue, and in a new school I'm joining, to create that safe environment that I hopefully will have above me, for me to have that environment, but for everybody in my team, because we're going on a journey, and every school, but for my new school, it's a brand new school and we're going on that journey together. So I'm a big believer in being able to walk away from a school being really proud and it can function brilliantly without you. And I think that's what you want, is that you've supported everybody and coached everybody so well that they can take the reins and they can take on extra responsibilities and things within the team. So that's, for me, my goal at the moment, I think, is becoming a better coach by working on myself, but also helping my team.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. And just sort of touching on the sort of access to career progression, you know, whether that is coaching or other ways you can upskill yourselves, you know, how do you currently perceive access to career progression, maybe in your region, you know, maybe sort of looking at the macro perspective, having worked in multiple countries, you know, what are your thoughts on that in terms of general access to career progression in the international sector? Jamie, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it can vary. You know, I'm just trying to think in terms of, you know, personal experiences in previous schools that I've been at. You know, you can go to a school which has a lot of really good staff, really highly motivated staff, but not many opportunities for progression. Or you can go to, you know, some schools that are much more foundational, with a lot more scope for growth. And it depends on what you perceive growth to be, I suppose. You know, the more traditional sort of view on growth might be working your way up the ladder. But I know from previous schools that I've worked at, I feel like I really grew as an educator, even though actually my label was exactly the same, you know, and it depends on what systems are in place at that school to allow you to grow and develop either as a teacher or an educator in general. I'm really hoping that in the role I'm going into, that I've got the scope now to actually go into that sort of more nuts and bolts style of leadership and progress in that way. But I also recognize the fact that I always feel like there's always going to be more work to be done to become a better teacher and educator, and hopefully that drip feeds into your leadership as well.
Lisa, what are your thoughts now in terms of access to career progression?
I actually really like what Jamie said about, it's not about, you know, the title, but what progression looks like and means to you. If you look at an international focus, if you're in a group of schools like many of us have been in the past, I know some of you mentioned different big groups around the world, there is a lot of career progression internally. You know, you look at the Wellington, the Nord Anglia, the Harrow, all of those kind of companies, that they send out the different jobs that are coming up for people to apply for internally. And so there is a lot of scope for career progression within schools like that. But then if you're working in an independent school, you really do need to look at what Jamie was saying about what does progression mean. And it could be that you're being upskilled in a certain area, but your title is staying the same. You know, years ago, I did the work of, I did a work on Robin Sharma, Leader Without a Title. And he talks about being the best version of yourself, regardless of what your title is. And if you're in a school that values the professional development of their staff on every single level of staff, not just teachers, that could be the learning assistants or the admin team or the marketing team, whatever, making sure that everyone's up to date with the most, you know, current research or AI or whatever it is, that is progression. And, you know, if you are then moving countries or moving another school, you are taking those skills and that knowledge with you that could end up in a different, you know, title or whatever it may be. But I think what, you know, if you are in an independent school, or a standalone school, it's up to the leaders to create avenues that are not necessarily always there. So looking for the strengths of the individuals you have in the team. And, you know, if you have somebody who has a certain strength, really a really big strength in an area, but you don't have that as a title, then the next academic year, looking at how you can work the positions of responsibility and try and introduce something that might fit the skill set of these people that you see who are aspiring leaders. And that helps with the retention of the staff as well. So yeah, I think it's about professional development on a whole, and what does growth mean, because it's more than just getting another title.
Arif, in terms of your experience in the UAE and now, well, you just moved to China, but yeah, what are your thoughts in terms of access to career progression in your experience?
I think the word when you say how you perceive it, I think that's really important, because it depends. All of us, Philip started by talking about how we all left our home countries to go abroad. So you have to think about, as an individual, why did we set off? What were our goals when we started? Was it to, you know, learn a new language? Was it to explore a different culture? Was it just to travel to new places? So once you get those goals, you know, once you have those in your head, then when you apply it to your setting, and then you have to work in a culture or in a community, in a school that values not just your skills as an educator, but one that's willing to help you achieve the goals that you set out to, you know, to do when you left. But I think one of the things that hasn't yet been mentioned about career growth and how I perceive it, I felt that the relationships you build in this, whether it's however many schools or countries you've been in, were very, very important in getting that next position. And those relationships are, I think they even outdo the merit that people have when, you know, their skill as an educator, because those relationships are what get you in the door, get you that interview, and then ultimately get you that offer in that position.
And just very quickly, Arif, touching on that, because it's an interesting point. How have you found ways to build those relationships that have got you to where you are? Do you feel, have they been networking sessions, facilitations by the school themselves? You know, how have you done that?
So I think I'm still, like I said, I'm still wanting to get to that middle leadership role. I had one in Canada. I was the head of ELL, but we were a very small department. And now at Repton, and now here in China, I'm just, you know, I'm starting out just at the bottom of the rung, you know, just previously an inclusion teacher, and here a middle school history teacher. So I think I got this position through you know, a search platform, and I went to a job fair where I met people. But what I perceived as how people were getting promoted internally was that the heads of school, I think it's not that it's rare, but they don't want to necessarily bring in someone from the outside when a position opens up. If there's someone internal who can take it, or someone they already know, I just feel that the head up that they have far outweighs most people's skill set.
Philip, your thoughts on that one in terms of access to career progression?
I come at it similar place as Lisa, in terms of running a school and now being in a much smaller group with only 2 schools. That independent side, you do have to manufacture those progressions for the staff to access. A lot's been spoken about progression in terms of title and in terms of internal growth within the teacher themselves. If I say look at more kind of the title element, that often is linked to budgets and how a school leader is going to be structuring their team and how they're able to then to make those positions happen. I compare international education. If I perceive that again back to home countries, similar to my previous answer, I say there's much more avenues for career progression in terms of titles, positions, and movements within the international sector. You are more transient. You don't have that base, financial base, in terms of owning of a property or family in a particular area you need to stay. So there's ability to move across. And then within major hubs of cities, so Lisa's in Bangkok, and there's many good schools there. There's a couple of us here in the UAE, and there's many, many schools here. There's the ability then to transition across within school, within the school areas too. So I perceive that it's, and I actually liked what Jamie said earlier on. It's a very personal experience. It's a personal answer of how I perceive what career progression is like. And I would say it's certainly stronger in the international sector than, say, in a home country within a local state sector, that ability.
Yael, Harish, your thoughts on that one in terms of the experiences of the educators you've worked with? How do they perceive access to career progression?
Sure. I would say that it's an obligation from your employer to ensure that they are keeping you abreast of innovative education. So obviously over the last couple of years, there's been a huge focus on, say, AI. And if the school is not forward thinking and not providing opportunities for their staff to develop these evolving skills, then I would say there's potentially a disservice there. I understand the budgets and the constraints related to budgets, but I think it's like when you have a class of students, you're not going to let a single student fail, right? If they do, it's your responsibility as the teacher. And I think as an employer, you have the same obligation of all your staff, whether they're operational or faculty or whatever they are, they need to be kept abreast with what's going on. So I would say it's an obligation that sometimes schools overlook, or they think that once we've got them through the door, we'll get 3 years out of them. There might be minimal PD opportunity, although Philip's right, PD opportunities or professional learning in international schools is a lot healthier than perhaps in state or national systems. So there is a level of that. But the bit that we haven't necessarily talked in depth about is the leadership. So recognizing that there's a whole bunch of potential leaders within your school, and whether they end up in leadership positions in your school or elsewhere, you have an obligation to support them in their pathway if they show an interest in that pathway. So I would say, yeah, it's a moral obligation, is what I would say.
Yael, what are your thoughts?
I will echo several of you. I've echoed what Harish just said, but I think Lisa and Jamie also, and Arif also touched, and Philip touched all of those other things. And I think, it's about career progression upwards, which in schools is, educator in the classroom, and then leadership within departments, and then principalship and head of school. But there's so much in between that can happen and can assist schools to become more efficient in what they do and more successful in what they do. And there's also career progression in the horizontal way. And I think Jamie and Lisa mentioned that. And one thing that Arif mentioned, and that's something that you can build system to that. It's system thinking to be able to support all your employees and be able to. And again, I'm going back to this notion, or that research tell us that employees, when they feel progress, when they see something in the future that they see that they can do, their self-efficacy grows, their motivation grows, and they may stay. So we're used to people leaving every 3 years in international education. Why? There will be a shortage shortly that we will need to fulfill. It costs a lot of money as well. We're wasting a lot of money on that. Why people are leaving, There are several reasons for that, but part of it, I think, it's this career progression that is not systematic.
I just wanted to add and talk to what Arif was saying. I do strongly believe that where there are career opportunities in terms of leadership, they should be opened up to everybody. So I think I think when people are promoted from within a school, there may be justifiable reasons, but it's not the ethical or right approach to take because it excludes everyone else that may have had the interest in going through that process. So I would like to see a lot more transparency when it comes to appointing leaders.
For me, my progression has been very dependent on management and my principals. I've only worked at very small independent international schools, so there is no room for progression within a franchise or anything like that. I really appreciate my first principal was very honest and said there is no progression at this school. You should be looking for somewhere where you can grow because it is limited here. And at my current school, I'm doing a NPQSL, and the middle leadership opportunities I have are all because my principal has suggested them to me. He's been really honest and open with communication, has told me about different opportunities, and has listened to what I've found lacking as well. So we did barely any CPD before, which was something I talked to him about, especially for primary. None of us are that confident with science in our team, and we have 3 science teachers in high school, 2 of which have PhDs. So I was like, it'd be really great, if they could talk to us. And so now we have a whole year of planned CPD for the next 12 months. So it's really good to be able to have that growth within the school and to have that leadership support you with everything.
Whitney, your thoughts on that one?
I definitely picked up on what Philip and Harris said, and I think that might have been from personal experience. And I 100% understand that these international schools are businesses and that there are so many moving parts that even I'm not in that high leadership position that I know. But I know as a core teacher and as a core middle leader, and Jamie might be able to jump into this, because I know Jamie's subject is also maths. It does sometimes result that, if you haven't got enough members of the team, or you haven't got enough maths teachers recruited, or actually, I need you to take on more classes, I need you to take on these things. Really do understand that. But I think it comes back to, and I think Lorna just mentioned it, was what opportunities are the school giving you then if it's not progression within that? If it's, look, I really need you to stay as the head of maths right now. I know you have a passion for pastoral, and I know this. Why don't we look at you doing your masters? Why don't we look at you taking on NPQSL? Why don't we look at and upskilling you that way? Because for me, that was one of the reasons I left my role to go and look for another one. And my new school actually offered that in year 2. Let's look at you doing your masters and your NPQSL. And that was a conversation I had within the first 2 meetings of the team there. So I do understand the timetables and all those different moving parts, but it really doesn't sit well with middle leaders or even teachers when it's, oh, but this person was promoted because also their timetable worked out better because, they're not having all of the same ADEC inspections that you're having, or they're not having this, or actually we need you to be in this position. And whilst I can understand, okay, this person's the role for this, but this is what we're going to do for you as well. And having senior leaders identify those people in the team who really love the school and really want to help be a part of make it work, just offering them alternative forms of professional development can keep people. And if not, they go and look for that development and that growth elsewhere. Because for me personally, it's not about the money. I think everyone can agree in teaching is we're not in it for the promotion of the money and the extra pay. It's the difference that we can make. And to make the difference, we need the knowledge and we need the training and we need the additional support, whether that's through masters or whether that's through like AI technology or PD or conferences. Sending some people on a few one-day conferences can change their mindset and how they feel about it, really, really well. So I think that's for me where I think schools need to look more at. I understand it's a business and there's moving parts, but identifying your middle leaders particularly, I think, and also teachers, what training is available and what do they want, what do people want, and what will they go on? So I think that's my number one at the moment.
Thanks, Whitney. Yeah, and just sort of now touching on those that have made that jump from classroom teaching into middle leadership, then senior leadership. So particularly Philip and Lisa, what have been some of the key opportunities and perhaps even challenges that you've both faced in that journey?
Max,
I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Yes, Yael, yeah.
Can I interrupt for a second? It's not planned. Something came up with what everybody said, and I wanted to ask if any one of you were asked at any stage of your career, what do you want, where do you want to go, and what do you want to be? You know, what type of role would you wish to take on next?
I definitely have been in my evaluations. So what, there's a reflective prompt about where you see yourself being. And I think just that question alone is enough for me to feel that somebody actually has an interest in what I want to do. And I might not ever want to progress in my career in terms of leadership, but just being asked is enough to feel that you're cared for.
It'd be great to get, Philip and Lisa's thoughts on that one in terms of, were you asked how were those opportunities provided to you along the way? Philip, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, pretty much every school, every leader I've worked under has gone through appraisal systems or should say performance coaching in that regard of looking at where I was looking to go or what things I wanted to experience. What was very good at one of my first schools was they gave us the idea of following and shadowing other leaders in the school to get a sense, because the two traditional routes within schools are academic and pastoral. They're kind of the traditional routes in terms of which way to go. And really, to be a leader, you need to be pretty solid over both of them once you get towards the top of the school. Otherwise, you always kind of struggling of not quite understanding the nuances of it. And I think of it a bit like that US TV show where they the undercover boss, and they send the boss back down to the shop floor to get a sense of what it's like again. So I think if you get that grounding in academic and pastoral, it can make a big difference. And I was fortunate enough to have that. I was able to shadow different leaders, sit in meetings, get a sense of how decisions make. And I think when you're in the meeting rooms, the conversations are more frank, they're more honest. You get a sense of how the decisions are made and what the other bigger picture that you in the different levels, you don't see it as a teacher, you don't see the different decision makings that the middle leaders having to see of a wider picture of the school. As a middle leader, you don't see what the senior leadership are seeing. As a senior leadership, you don't see what the principal's dealing with. And the principal probably doesn't see what the CEO is looking at. So those able to experience those different things really made a valued choice for me, understanding of which way I wanted to go. In the end, I kind of did both, but it gave me an insight of that way.
Yeah,
and I'd say just the question, Max, you originally asked as well was about kind of challenges along the way. I think there isn't a senior leader ever, I think, in education that hasn't at some point had some kind of imposter syndrome of, can I actually do this? I'm now in this role. Can I do all of these things? And often for senior leaders, you often feel that you have to take on everything all at once. And this is my third new school now. I think I'm a glutton for punishment with these things. And there's definitely a case of wanting to feel like you have to take on every role of everything. So the challenge often is organizing time. You get pulled left, right, and center as a leader. You get criticized more than praised. Everything should be right because that's apparently your job to do, and everything wrong is always your fault. So prioritizing time is often the challenge as a leader, of understanding how to what's critical now, what can move later in the day, and what we can look at in a month's time.
Lisa, what are your thoughts now in terms of the opportunities you had and the key challenges along the way?
Yeah, so firstly, I never wanted to be a leader. I was happy to be a teacher for the rest of my career. And I think I did, no, I didn't get asked if I wanted to be a leader. I was kind of told that I should be a leader and here's some opportunities for you. So I think along the way I have been asked, but not initially when I got into leadership. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers Yael's question before. But some of the opportunities, I think the biggest opportunity for me was having a wider impact. And that's why I did end up going into leadership, because I thought, from the 25 kids that I can have an impact on to the 500 kids, because I'm now leading teachers and helping teachers and supporting teachers who are then impacting the kids that they work with. So I think that has been a huge opportunity for me. My first real step into like senior leadership was through the bigger company that I worked for. across 11 schools in the UAE, and having that opportunity to work across different schools, the different curriculums, working with so many different educators, and having people around me who had aspirations and had connections. So through that, you know, I've been able to become a CIS and an EASC and a tribal visitor and inspector, and now I'm an NPQ facilitator and assessor. And that's all because of the connections that you make and the aspiration of the people you see around you. So I think that's been really incredible. The challenges though, and I think this is specific to somebody who's moving up within the same school. A challenge of somebody moving up within the same school is relationships change. And, you know, if you're a classroom teacher, say, you know, I was grade 3 classroom teacher and become middle leader or a senior leader or whatever it may be in the same school with the same colleagues that I'm working with, your relationships do change. You have to be careful about what you can say in front of people. You know, you can't always, you know, speak as candidly. They might see you differently. And for me, I was going in, you know, in a head of teaching and learning role for the corporate office into the school where I worked for 4 years as a teacher, and now I'm reviewing their practices, and that was really challenging. Like, people are like, you were working beside us a year ago, now who do you kind of think you are? And it's not that I ever wanted to be that person, and you know, obviously I worked on my relationships and made sure that it was a non-threatening process, but it does change dynamics, unfortunately. So and I also think another challenge is dealing with the different levels of stakeholders that you would then work with. Because coming from, you know, a classroom base or even a middle leader, say you're a head of math or whatever, moving into other positions where you now need to report to the board, or, you know, if you're a teacher moving into middle leadership and you have to run parent sessions, that might not be something that you would have done before. And so you're opening yourself up to so many different stakeholders that you have to engage with, and being able to, you know, go between those different stakeholders and know how to manage them and how to present yourself. That is a challenge. It is something you need to learn and you need support with, because, you know, as classroom teachers, that's not what we do every day. We're there with the kids, and, you know, speaking in front of a whole bunch of kids is a lot easier than speaking in front of the board or 200 parents. So, you know, all of those things that you might not necessarily think of, but that comes along with it, with the role. And yeah, like I think Philip said, imposter syndrome is probably the biggest thing that I ever had and have had with going into leadership.
And you, sorry, Lisa, just touching on one thing you said that really sort of sparked my interest. In terms of the fact that you said you were always, you know, you were actually quite happy just wanting to be a teacher, but you felt like you were sort of somewhat pushed into senior leadership. That's a very interesting concept to sort of, you know, see it from that perspective. You know, how did they identify that, and you know, how did they make you feel comfortable to step up, continually step up? That's an interesting perspective you mentioned there.
Yeah, so, you know, I've always kind of been a leader in, like I said, with the Robin Sharma work, which I only did recently, but in my whole life, being a leader within whatever role I do. And so within like a month of being in Dubai, I was in middle leadership and like head of literacy of the school and head of grade level. But I didn't see that as anything. I just saw that as, you know, I kind of know what I'm doing, so I'm helping other people out. So, you know, I'm happy just being that and being me. And then through the work that I was doing in those roles, I caught the attention of someone from the corporate office, and she came out and had a chat with me, and I was just outright like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm just me, like, no. But then over time, sharing different, you know, strengths that I have, and showing what they were looking for and how I could help and how I could make a difference made me say, okay, I will apply, only because I can see how I could fit into that and how I could, you know, influence other people or support in this way. But I saw it more as I was going into support than actually I was becoming a leader. And then, yeah, now somehow I'm a leader. That's really interesting. So it's all about, yeah, sharing your values and really helping those around you to lift them up. That's that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing, Lisa.
Moving on to the next question. So looking at, what should be the key drivers? So if we're looking at it from a holistic perspective, what do each of you feel should be the key drivers for promotion and progression, and maybe how could that be better recognized at the moment? So yeah, just looking at those key drivers you feel are most important. Arif, what are your thoughts on those key drivers?
I think one of the things that Lisa just mentioned about how, we're classroom teachers and then suddenly someone's asked to go into a management role. As a teacher, you do weekly continuous professional development. In the summer, you're trying to upskill and learn more about whether it's the subject matter or, the profession. And then when you move into management, it's a completely different skill set. So one of the, I think, key drivers should be is this person trained as a leader? Have they done some courses on how to manage adults, how to speak in front of, Lisa mentioned different stakeholders now. Because when you get into the profession, you get into, develop relationships with your students. You want to be that person in front of the class who connects with everyone, who, becomes that mentor figure, who then, like I said, ignites that spark in their minds. But when you move into leadership now, you have a completely different, like Lisa mentioned, you have different stakeholders, you have a different audience that you have to deal with, you have a whole different set of tasks to complete. So can you manage people? Are you efficient? Are you able now to transfer the skill set? Because it's not a natural movement from working in the classroom to now suddenly being in an office and having to do all this admin.
Thank you. Whitney, what are your thoughts on those key drivers that you feel are most important?
I think I agree with what Arif said. I think I was thinking about knowledge and being impact driven for the school. I think having the right motivations for it is really important. And I do recognize people have different motivations. There's not one motivation that fits, but I think my number one would be, is this person reflective and are they empathetic? And do they lead with empathy? And have we seen that in the classroom? And have we seen that with their interactions with parents and other stakeholders? Because senior leaders, especially if you're promoting, or middle leaders, if we're promoting teachers up into middle leadership, and I comment on this one more because I do think when you go from middle leadership to senior leadership, not that I have experience of that one yet, is that you've had some experience of leadership. But when you go from being a teacher, you're not a leader. You're responsible for your 24 little ones and your parents. So making sure, like Arif said, you have the right support in place. I think one of the most dangerous things that schools do is they go, great, you're a brilliant teacher, you've got some good parent skills, good people skills with the parents, off you go. And then suddenly you're in a middle leadership role and you're having to do, observations, you're having to put members of your team on support plans, and you're having to have those difficult conversations. But how much experience have you had in it? So I think making sure that promoting people into middle leadership, it's not just, okay, they're in that position now, they can manage that team below them. It's a continuous support, and there has to be support coming really, really from the top. Like the CEO needs to be supporting the principal and vice versa. And these skills that we're listing are really, the CEO should have them and the principal should have them, and then the senior leaders should have them all the way down to make sure that, leadership is contagious. And if you see that you've got leaders, if I've got a senior leader that really isn't leading with empathy and isn't being reflective, it's then I end up becoming a bit of a protector for my team or trying to model that, or I have a risk of becoming a leader that I don't want to be in terms of some skill sets as well, because you can pick up the environment around you. So I think making sure that leaders and senior leaders and middle leaders are supporting each other to make sure that supports all the way through. I think that answered it. I might have said something different to the question. I feel like
no, that's absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in terms of setting the culture, right, the tone for the broader culture, and culture we haven't really touched on too much at the moment, but I think that's another really important area, isn't it? Developing and fostering that collaborative, empathetic culture is absolutely key, and that does come from the top down, right? Jamie, what are your thoughts on that in terms of those key drivers, do you feel?
Yeah, it maybe not something we've really touched upon at this point, but maybe Whitney will be able to understand a little bit more clearly, because I'm just thinking about where I am right now in an apartment complex where a lot of the teachers at the school that I've been teaching at are in the same place. And I think one of the things that we sometimes forget about, we think about the sort of school-based nature of, what we're doing in our day-to-day jobs and, the progression there. But quite often I'll be bumping into a lot of my friends, my co-workers, just as I walk from here to the shops, and sort of going into, and this might be slightly touching upon one of the future questions coming up, but that clarity in what progression can look like can be really important. And I know, there are lots of factors outside of the classroom that can be a big driver in whether a teacher or a leader wants to make that jump up or move across or whatever it is. So, from my own personal experience, I remember, so my first year in Abu Dhabi, becoming a father and not really wanting to make that move to leadership at that point, because I was just trying to make sure that I had all of my, my ducks in a row at this moment, and, be still continually successful as a teacher, and being sort of coaxed into leadership because my head of department planned out a very clear pathway and, to enable me to be successful in that role. And it's quite interesting, when you are trying to, identify potential leaders, if you have that personal relationship with them, if you see them outside of the classroom, if you are friends with them, that can make things a little bit easier sometimes. But as I said, that there are other factors there, right? We have to remember that not everybody in teaching is necessary. I would gather that most teachers are in this because they want to be teachers and they do care about the students. But there are some international teachers that, how do I say this, are more contractors. They know that they could be in many different schools doing the role that they are doing, and they could do it wherever they want to. So sometimes motivating those staff takes more than just you are good at that role. You have to look at other factors and things like that too. So that could be a personal thing. That could be, I want to clearly show you where you could go. It could be a whole multitude of different things. It could even be, I will pay you in time in order for you to do your role properly. So there's many things at play there.
Yeah. Harish, Yael, in terms of those key drivers, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not sure that it's responding to the question, but I'll do my best. I think, when you're in a leadership position and you're looking for other leaders within the school, you are looking for people who put their hand up, who are innovative, people who have these dispositions, these innate skills to be a colleague. You'll have witnessed in, say, a collaborative planning meeting, somebody lifting somebody else up that may not be understanding a concept or needing additional help. So when I'm looking for future leaders to support, I'm looking for these qualities that I think make good leaders in the future. Now, if you don't see those qualities, it doesn't mean that you can't build them and teach them, but that is certainly a foundational starting point that you would recognize as a head of school or a principal. So ethical decision making, having integrity, keeping calm under pressure, all these things that we know the books tell us make good leaders.
What I've heard from everybody speaking about the possibilities, the challenges, and also the last question, I feel like it's, and that confirms what I've been experiencing as a consultant, that it's rather ad hoc kind of system. There's no system in place. It's a lot based on relationship, which shouldn't be the case, because that discriminates others who are not able to create those relationships. And it should be based on how Harish described it, but systematically within a school. So the school will have a system to identify those people, and the leaders of this school would go and look for those who want to progress, and even those who don't want to progress to leadership. Provide a horizontal kind of progression. What are they good in? What can they bring additional to the community that is not a title, like many of you said. It's not, but it has to be systematic. It can be ad hoc, and it can't be relationship based, because that's not ethical and not fair.
Yeah. And lastly, Philip, at Arcadia Global, what are those key drivers that you set out for promotion and progression within the school?
I read the question slightly differently. I took the answer of the key drivers for progression in schools is, what is the needs of the school? What are the strengths? What are the areas of development? What do you want to enhance upon, and what do you want to look to improve? So those needs of the school then factor in of what progression is there available within the school for teachers then to access and move into. And in terms of recognizing the characteristics, Harish, I think hit the nail on the head. Exactly those things there. Personally, I look for character, work ethic, and competence, and all those values together shows me. I thought Harris said a really good thing about lifting others up. Yeah, that's what I look for in terms of a leader. The skills and knowledge can be taught, but judgment comes through experience. And if I can find someone with the skills and the knowledge, I can teach them through training and through learning with me, informally and formally, the judgment of how to be a leader in that element. And that's the key aspects I look for. So I took the question slightly differently. I took it in terms of what are the key drivers within school, in terms of my school and all schools I've worked in as leaders that have been recruiting or looking to drive the school forward and writing development plans. What are the needs of the school? What is it we need to do?
And sort of my penultimate question really, I suppose, focused on the teachers and middle leaders on the call. How does having a clear sense, if you go into a school and you've got a really clear sense of what that progression pathway looks like, how does that sort of change your motivation, sense of purpose, or even maybe decision making about staying within the school? How does that, having that clear sense, really change the dynamic of the school that you're working in and your feeling about it? Lorna, could we start with you on that question?
I think it makes quite a lot of difference because you sort of broaden what areas you're looking at. So my past school, where there was no progression, it was very much, okay, what can I do for my class? How can I do this to improve my classroom learning? And then coming to my new school, where I was told the different ways I could progress, what I could do, I started looking at the bigger picture, like what can be done for all of primary school, and not just, oh, I want to do this for my class. How can this work for everyone in primary? So we're starting like a new RSE program this year, whereas previously that's something I would have just done for myself. Now I'm looking at, well, I've got literacy and I can link that to that. And it really opens you up to the different areas you can go. It gives you sort of a broader focus.
Whitney, your thoughts on that one in terms of, does that change your motivation, having a super clear sense of where you can progress in a school?
I think understanding that the school being transparent, that they will help you get there, whether that role will exist in that school, whether it will be within the school group, or whether or not they want to see you go to a completely different country and be amazing as well. I think there's no way they can say these are the XYZ steps, because no one even knew we'd be doing AI training 2 years ago and there would be AI leads in schools. So education is constantly changing, but I think senior leaders and even middle leaders, and having that time to have those conversations. And I even respect leaders that say, and I've had this experience of, at the moment, like the focus is really improving maths. You're the head of maths. We've got a lot of department changes going on. This role will most likely, we'd like to keep you in this role for a few years going forward. And for me, with other passions within the school, on pastoral, on presenting at conferences, on teaching and learning, for me, I realized that they were completely transparent, and actually that the steps weren't going to work for me in that place, and that's also fine, and I found a school, luckily, that was very transparent, was very open. I seem to jump to new schools, which I think I can only speak off my experience of new schools. They have so much more opportunities and you end up wearing so many more hats. It is maybe a little trickier, I don't know, sometimes people could add to that, but I think them being honest and open, that they will help you get to where you want to get, and saying, if we can't offer this financially, we can offer this through professional development, we can get experts in, we can send you to a conference to present. As long as they're adding, from my personal experience, to my CV, and they're giving me more experience, more exposure, more networking, more connections, that's what I would think. But I think a clear purpose, yes, knowing my purpose is also really important, but the schools being honest and open about whether it works in that place or elsewhere is good.
Jamie, your thoughts on that one in terms of having a clear sense?
I suppose I'll give you a quote, right? Clarity is the antidote to anxiety. And I think, and it doesn't have to be clarity in the sense of I can clearly see the way that I'm going to go up. I'm really hoping that the role that I'm stepping into does give me that scope for progression. It's a relatively new school. It will need to expand. It will need assistant heads, deputy heads, second, and so on in the next couple of years or so. And I do genuinely feel like I'm going into a role which would give me that genuine progression. But I have also been in places And I think this is where I touch upon again that idea of what is important to international teachers outside of the classroom, because sometimes, you know, you can be happy with the role that you're in because you are there for different reasons. You can be there because you're just traveling the world at this moment, or you're experiencing different things. And I have been to places where I've had that same sense of clarity, but not in terms of, clearly, if you just stick with us for a couple of years, you're going to end up here. It's more a case of, well, if you just stick with us for a couple of years, you have really helped us out at our stage of the school, and you have continued your progression in your career. So, you know, I see it both ways. I'm really hoping that where I'm going is going to be that sort of sweet spot of, I'm going to develop as a teacher, develop as a leader, you know, in so many different ways, develop personally. But there are other perspectives potentially to think about in that. And I think, particularly with that transient nature of international teaching, it is okay sometimes if you get somebody in that fills up that department. I think Whitney touched upon it. You know, when you're trying to fill up a maths department, you have only 6 teachers, you need 9. If you can just fill that department up for the year, you're good again for a year, and then you can have a look at it again next year, can't you? But, you know, there's a direction of travel for each school. And sometimes you just have to do things short term, but with a long term sort of vision and purpose as well.
Yeah. Arif, your thoughts on that one in terms of clarity?
I think, you know, Yael asked earlier, has anyone actually sat down with you and asked? And I don't think I had that. Instead, I think I had to kind of chart out my own path. I started, you know, as an ELL teacher. I worked with adult and college students, and I thought the way to get further on in my career would be to get a master's. And then I returned to, or I taught public schools. And then I said, okay, how can we go further? And I said, okay, let's travel. But then when I was in Dubai, I felt like as an inclusion teacher, or the department, we weren't a part of the mainstream. I felt like we were kind of sidelined. You know, there was maths, there was English, there's sciences, and then there's specialist teachers, or the computer teachers, or the PE teachers, or language teachers. And then we're like this third tier category where you get, you know, you can teach ELL, and there was a Senko, but there was no, I figured after a while that's it. That was where I was going to be. If I was going to stay, I was just going to be the ELL teacher. So my move was also about, okay, I could switch departments, and I moved into humanities. I feel like now there's a path for me. Like Jamie mentioned, maybe you're filling a spot for a couple of years, and now you find a new role where you see that path more clearly, and you say, okay, now I'm in a more mainstream department. I feel like there are opportunities for growth in this school, and there will be roles that open up in middle leadership if I stay on and I put in the work. And then you have to demonstrate that you can do not just the job, that you have the skills, you have the empathy, you have some of the qualities that were mentioned earlier to get that leadership role.
Yael, Harish, from what you've observed and seen in the sector?
So I would say that people need to feel valued and believed in. So I'm going to go back to the example that I gave at the beginning. You know, when you have your 22 students, each of those students needs to believe that they can be successful with anything that they're tasked to do. And I think any member of your staff, faculty, etc., should feel that any opportunity that's opened should be eligible to have a go at applying. So I think that need to feel success, whether you want to or not, just knowing that it's a possibility that's open, equitable to everybody, gives you that sense of belonging and purpose to an organization. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't approach it that way, and then they experience problems with turnover and belonging.
Yeah, thanks, Harish. Yeah,
it's really not funny. It's great that everybody spoke actually towards what research tells us, that progress and clarity fuels them and gives them purpose to go forward and to do amazing things with their students, for their schools. And more than what they said, I can't say more than that. It speaks straight to self-efficacy, to feeling valued, to progress, to the progress principle that Amabel and Kremer work, academic work, discovered, that even small steps create progress, and then people feel empowered. And that creates motivation, that creates loyalty to a place as well, and of course impacts the students.
Thanks, Eyal. Great, thank you so much, guys. And just quickly move on to my last question now. So we've touched on a lot of, what kinds of support, will, make you feel included and sort of have that clear sense of clarity in terms of leadership development and progression within the sector. Are there any additional structures or resources, that you feel would make a difference in terms of career progression going forwards? Lisa, I'd love to get your thoughts on that last question.
Firstly, I think the most important resource to have is somebody who also believes in you and who's trying to build you up and is able to coach you and support you along the way. Like that person or people around you makes the difference, because you always need someone to help you along the way. You can't just do this in isolation. You really can't. But what resources can we have? I think there's a lot of external PD that's out there now, and I personally really believe in growing people based on what their interests are. And so I do have those conversations, like Yael was saying, has anyone ever asked you? I ask people now, like, what is your interest? What do you want to do in the future? And then let's look at different avenues. And it doesn't have to, always be like the NPQs or formal courses like that, but there's people who have different interests, in inspection or curriculum development, or they are interested in AI, or they really like photography, so how can we help them with marketing? But I think the biggest resource is having different things up your sleeve that you can give to people as opportunities to help them develop themselves. As a senior leader in a school, I try and always look at what is out there for people. If somebody does come to me with an interest, I can say, oh, this could be something you could do, or that could be something you can do. But if I myself am not knowledgeable enough, how can I support, the aspiring leaders around me? So I think it's really important to have different opportunities up our sleeve that we can give to other people and help to promote and grow them.
Philip, your thoughts on that one in terms of any additional structures or resources you think are beneficial?
I think Lisa nailed most of that. So well done, Lisa. I think you got all that right. I remember reading the question itself and thinking about back at our own career and what made a difference. Role models make a big difference of who you're following, but not everyone in education is fortunate enough to have those role models. And I was very fortunate to have great role models to help learn from and teach me the way. I think one of the most important things, and I don't want to put words into Lisa's mouth, but I hope she agrees with this as well, is when you're in leadership, of having friends that are also in leadership. There's nothing better than being able to go and talk to other people and discussing the issues and sharing that. And that was something that, from a professional point of view, it could be seen as networking, but actually from a relationship point of view, having people in either similar positions or higher positions and bouncing ideas off. After this call, I'm meeting a friend who's a head of science who wants me to look at his CV. And what does that look like? So having that network and friends and people who you can go talk to is so invaluable to bounce ideas off. Sometimes teaching such a unique industry. I worked in business beforehand, and teaching is very unique in that regard. So you can get caught into kind of a microcosm of your own school and your own organization and not see outside that of what's happening and what's going on. So to have those other people you can talk to, and whether that's starting from a networking point of view or whether it's just keeping in contact with people who have left your school that you were friends with, who have progressed in other schools, keep in contact with them, ask them questions. How does this work in that school? How do you do this? Where do you get to that? I've got this idea. Would that work? You've done something like this before. Can you put your eyes over this? Makes a huge difference for me when I was progressing and moving up, because in leadership, you are responsible for an area. And whether it is taking on a literary lead or in a senior leader, you are responsible for that. So you are coming up with the ideas and solving it and producing and ultimately quality assuring it. So to have other people look at those things, for me personally, as I was growing as a new leader, made a big difference to the place where I am now. That's something I'm quite keen to do with my middle leaders, that when they are coming with new ideas, I look over it with them and go through that process with them of helping them through that journey of how to get that right, in the same way that people did that with me.
Whitney, what are your thoughts on it in terms of that support that you found most useful? And are there any gaps you feel that could be filled going forward?
I think what was interesting for me is I had an amazing founding head of secondary at my last school, and every week for all of the middle leaders, we were a smallish school, so it was feasible. She met with us every week, and it was a sit down, very casual. Now I realized she was sitting coaching me, but at the time it was just a catch up and work through things, and that was probably the best development I ever got in 3 years. And when she moved on from the school and I didn't have that, I had to kind of do what Philip said. I had to look elsewhere for, and it was luckily people who'd moved away from the school, and I keep in touch with them, and we bounce ideas off each other. But having a senior leader that had such an open door policy and created such a safe culture within the school was so important. And I've met leaders that they have meetings with everyone in the school, and they sit down with them, they say, we're going to get to know each other, and they do that, and it's very forced, and sometimes people don't know. But creating that culture of trust where you have such a safe environment that you can go to the senior leaders and you can go and talk to them about, yes, your career goals and what you want to do, but actually things that are going on in your personal life, or things that are affecting you, or things that actually might be affecting you, that you're not going to be the best leader at the time because you've got things going on. We're all international teachers. We all have that challenge of family being back home. And I've got a really good friend of mine at the moment this summer, sadly going through a few health things. And she said to me, I don't know which senior leader in my school to talk to, because I don't feel comfortable to talk to any of them about this. And that really hit me, that I thought I was so lucky that I had someone that I could go and say, I'm falling apart a little bit this week because this thing is going on in my personal life. And having someone that just went, okay, fully understand, it was a safe space. It was never used against me or anything like that. It was just like, how can we support you? How can we help you? How can we make sure that you have that support? And I think when you don't have that, particularly in international schools, it's not even just a leadership thing. It is about culture. And you said we haven't talked a lot about culture, but I think everything we've talked about is about culture, of creating that safe. You can't coach people if they don't feel safe. You can't have trust if they don't feel safe. You can't have that environment that gives all these amazing things and progression if people don't feel safe to be honest and reflective and make mistakes and ask questions. You've got to create that culture. So I think for me, it's having a leader in the past that's created such trust and such a safe environment has meant my growth of going to conferences, of leading workshops across other schools and being confident enough to go there. I knew I had a safety net in my head of secondary, that if it all went wrong, she was fully supportive and she was there to help me reflect and fix it for next time. So I think senior leaders, middle leaders, anyone who's supporting their peers needs to probably focus on creating that trust and that safety within the school first before anything else falls into place.
Jamie, your thoughts on that one in terms of what's been...
Yeah, just to sort of synthesize some of the ideas that have been brought in previously, this idea of time. And, education is such a time poor profession. And I think if we feel like we are being given time, then quite often as educators, we feel a lot better about ourselves. And, so coming to Whitney's idea there, if you've got a personal issue, I don't know how many times last year I had to ask for time to quickly go home and, sort something out because my daughter was sick, or I need to go to an appointment or whatever. That time investment, whatever your sort of personal situation is or your professional situation is, I think is really important. So time investment can be, I'm going to give you the time to actually look at how you do cover, because you've not seen what that looks like before, but I want you to shadow me and I want you to see what that looks like so that you have that string to your bow. Or we're going to give you that 3 days off because you need to attend that course and that is important to you at this moment. Or as I said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to have a moment because I can see that this is a pretty difficult day, whatever. I do feel when, education is such a time poor profession, just that time investment can mean so much to us. Going back to Philip as well, that time to catch up with people and have a good vent sometimes is really important and soul restoring as well, isn't it? So I think, having that time investment also brings all the other things up. We trust other people, we connect and all those, other things too. But yeah, just listening to everybody's points of view there, I felt like time was sort of the thing that brought those things together.
Yeah. Arif, your thoughts on that one in terms of what's been important to you so far?
I really like what Whitney and Jamie said there. So I too have had bosses that, you know, I've been able to walk into their room, and if they give you the time to sit down and just unload and be completely honest for a moment, where you let yourself be vulnerable, I think that's really valuable to the profession. But you also mentioned gaps, and I think one of the gaps is transparency. I feel like there's, you know, education in theory wasn't really devised for the for-profit international system that a lot of us are working at. And then you show up at a school and, you know, packages are confidential. You don't know what the person next to you is making. And then that starting point is very important as a result. So where you start, you know, you have, I mean, I'm talking about package-wise or salary-wise, where you start. And even if you have a boss that's supportive, there's only so much within the rules that HR and then admin can promote you to. So that's why I think there is movement, because that's where you are at that starting point. You're not able to jump to where you want to go to. So then you feel like I have to move to get to where I want to get to. So I think that's a gap. And then letting everyone know what everyone is doing, letting people know where, you know, the fees are being invested, being very open with in terms of what teachers are making and where the money that the students are paying is going. I think that would really help the whole system.
Lorna, your thoughts on that one in terms of what you found useful to date?
Yes, I was going to echo what Philip said, and having friends at different schools has been a massive help, especially friends who are sort of newer teachers and seeing how they're finding things, telling me different things. It really helps with your own reflection, because you think, oh my goodness, I didn't even think of that. Is that something I'm doing? Or, oh, well, that's a really good idea. Maybe that's something we can bring back. Maybe that's what we want to include. Or, oh, that doesn't sound great. Is that something we want to stay away from? There's so many different areas that you're not aware of, and that's been surprisingly helpful. And another area which is a bit more unusual, but our school has a really strong PTA. And for me personally, I've had some really good support from the parents, which has gone back into the school. So, for example, my first year, I ran a science fair. I'd never done anything like that before, and it was fine. It was okay. And then I did it again last year, and I had the PTA come up to me and go, wow, such an improvement. It's amazing. Like, it's done much better than last year. We're going to go tell, you know, your principal, like, how great it is to see the development here. So that was really nice. And to get that back. And then you're also getting that direct feedback from the parents as well. So I know that is not always common, but we're a very small school. So there really is a very strong sense of community here. And that's been really helpful as well with development.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lorna. And lastly, yeah, so Harish and Yaya, what are your thoughts on that question in terms of additional structures you feel need to be put in place, and how are you sort of looking to develop that with NextGen? It'd be great to finish on that.
Networks, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved, right? So leadership is very, very isolated, and having those confidential conversations, particularly when there's conflict within your own school, having those conversations with people outside of your school, perhaps who have been in similar situations before, is really, really useful, whether that's a colleague or a professional, or even NextGen. It does go a long way in helping perhaps resolve some of those issues. But network and people, I think, are two key aspects that everyone's mentioned today.
Yeah, the networks are really helpful as long as they're not disturbing the systems within schools, and making the networks as a career progression machine that help people get forward, rather, you know, more systems in place. And what I've seen impactful, the most impactful support hasn't been one-off initiative. It's been a deliberate system that brings together clarity, sponsorship, and resources to help people develop their career forward. And looking ahead, we need career pathways that go beyond multiple directions and are recognized in title, pay, and opportunity. And salary structure is one big thing in international schools that need to be revised, I think, because it's very, very old-fashioned and a lot of schools are using it. I'm not sure about the big companies. I think the big companies do have different structures and are more modern, but I think independent international schools really go by years of experience, and then the bachelor, master, and PhD, and there's nothing in between, and you're not gaining all of those leadership roles as something towards your so that goes along, those salary scales goes along with the career development. So if once you have the career development developed, then the salary scales are the next step.